let's talk about Yuki Tsunoda. Is he doing enough? I asked you lot, and you seem to think he's doing... And honestly, right now, I would agree. But how do Red Bull and the journos rate him, really? Because I think there's a little bit of a disconnect. 5 races in, and taking a cue from Flavio Briatore's 6-race school of thought, I checked the pulse. My polls are resounding, middling, adequate. But is that good enough? Well, according to Red Bull's boss Christian Horner, who according to internet rumours was about to face the sack after 400 races in charge of Red Bull Racing if the results didn't come in, the team is focusing purely on Max Verstappen's bid to secure his 5th world title in a row, equaling what Michael Schumacher was able to do in 2004. A record I thought would never be broken, but considering where we are right now, that could be tested. And if you subscribe right now to this channel, I'm cooking up a video going over the records that I think probably will never be broken ever again in Formula 1. And a little spoiler, Max Verstappen, he has about 3 of those. But yeah, Horner's in a bit of a strange spot, under pressure, but also strangely insulated. For once, the team doesn't seem to care about the Constructors' title. I can think of maybe the extra ATR time for 2026, that's a starter. And then, of course, well, you know, Tsunoda's there, Honda, final year, you know, proper send-off and all of that. But here's what Christian had to say after the Imola Grand Prix, given where the drivers ended up. Well, look, the Constructors is very much a long shot at the moment, so all our focus is on the driver's title. Having Yuki in play again is really important. It was a shame because he drove a good race today. If he had started in position, he would have been much further up, and hopefully that will come over the coming races. I mean, trying to figure out where Yuki stands in the Red Bull narrative at the moment is really, really tricky. And now, based on my poll, what the journalists are saying and what Red Bull are saying, no one's quite sure where he is right now. He's either trying to soften a driver's struggles or amplifying their highlights. It's defensive yet not assertive. So does Red Bull need to try and be extra assertive right now to defend their drivers? You could argue from both sides really, because let's be real here. The team's main focus right now is indeed to keep Max Verstappen happy by any means necessary. And as I touched upon in my predictions video yesterday, that GT3 Nürburgring test by one Franz Hermann is that Red Bull have managed to successfully spin that little exercise of Verstappen's into something that they could easily laud as them being free, easygoing, chill, relaxed, perfectly fine with Max Verstappen going all guns blazing around the green hell. Because he can stick it in Toto's face, who won't supposedly allow Valtteri to bear all in a calendar or something like that, his bum being now well and truly clothed. And Zach Brown, you seriously think he's going to let Lando or Oscar take part in some kind of Indy 500 cameo or something other than Formula 1? No, Christian's going to go, well, you know what to say about Red Bull? We allow our drivers to express themselves properly. So, yeah. Max doing his own thing with his own team. Yeah, Christian Horner's now owned it, so smooth, Christian. Another thing that the team are doing right now, seemingly, is fixing the car, and not the driver, which could be an aspect as to why Yuki's problem in qualifying has not become a major issue, or at least not as big as it could be. Now, you're probably wondering why I'm talking about Christian and Max right now, since the topic of today's video is about Yuki Tsunoda, but don't worry, I am going somewhere with this, but it's important to know the bigger picture of Red Bull here, so do bearman with me, okay? Because we've heard so many times this year that Max's biggest lamentation toward the team was to do with the car and not to do with the driver. Because he was protesting against the team's lack of attention to the RB21. But the team thought that doing a driver swap with Liam Lawson to Yuki would fix the problem entirely. It didn't. At least not entirely. Now though, according to Max, the upgrades brought for Imola have had a positive effect, which might benefit Yuki too, since he is involved in the development, the team vowing to take his feedback into account as part of their campaign to learn from their cutthroat and reactive history of axing drivers. And then of course, tunnel vision of the Verstappen variety. Because if they don't do this now, how are they going to handle life after Max? Because it will come. Whenever that happens, it is going to happen. They must prepare for the Verstappening. And especially when you look back to last year with the RB20 around this circuit, this was the circuit which really brought to light all of the issues that the car was having and Verstappen really starting to falter for his championship campaign. And now, 12 months later, completely different story. That car was as solid as a rock. Max pointing to better tyre life and much more stability and balance, which was not something you would have seen around Bahrain and Miami. We all thought it was the lowest that Red Bull could muster, but no, they have managed to bounce back. There is something in this RB21 after all, and therefore credit where credit is due. So maybe they've sorted out the correlation issues that they've been plagued with and many other teams were plagued with last year. Maybe.
But then we're starting to hear some conflicting reports from their own technical team, Pierre Vacher. Does Yuki reflect this sense of optimism? Whilst Max, as you could tell, was very happy, Tsunoda was more mixed in his take on the upgrades, not entirely sure of their true efficacy, which the French technical director agreed with, perhaps giving the true assessment of the RB21's Imola package that some parts were track-specific, McLaren weren't as strong as they'd been expected to be, despite ruling the roost in all the practice sessions, and yes, there were of course the mumblings about the FIA's technical directives that were introduced related to the brake and wheel department that could have compromised McLaren, even though ultimately that has been denied by the team. There's no real telling whether or not these upgrades will well and truly stick for the next few races or so. We'll only know for sure around the Monaco and Spanish Grand Prix, since if you can do well around the Circuit de Catalunya, you can do well pretty much anywhere, really. But there was one little tidbit that I found doing my research for this video that did kind of get overlooked by the media, and that is, for the first time, Yuki Tsunoda is running the same exact spec of car as Max Verstappen. So let me tell you why Yuki getting the full fat RB21 experience really matters. I can give you 3 reasons, and I should warn you, you might be thinking I'm a Yuki stan, but not all of these reasons are good. Even though Yuki and Max were running slightly different front noses, this whole sentiment of getting the same RB21 as Max is a sort of mark of confidence, only 5 races into his senior team tenure. It then finally lets the engineers compare 2 identical cars on track, and then, of course, the side effect of that is that it puts a strain on the team's limited stock of new parts, especially when Yuki crashed. So, yeah, they're not all good. So, yeah, you can rest assured I'm trying to be as impartial as I can be, considering how much I've been trying to champion Tsunoda. And I know that you're probably thinking that, oh, Red Bull are only trying to be nice because it's their final year with Honda. But then you got to remember, Yuki's no longer officially tied to Honda. He's his own man now, and he's trying to convince Red Bull that he's got what it takes to remain with them as a driver when Honda gets into bed with Aston Martin. But nevertheless, you've still got to look at the positive side of things, that now, finally, after a fair few races of settling himself into the senior team, him initially at the Japanese Grand Prix having a watered-down RB21, one with a slightly bigger operating window, one that had extra downforce to make things a little bit more forgiving, at the cost of overall performance, which quite frankly for Yuki at that first race weekend, he could not crash. And Red Bull kinda had to do this. They kinda had to put the training wheels on Yuki to try and fix the optics of them having tunnel vision regarding Max. They needed to go like, well, see? Look, we're tailoring the car to Yuki. Yeah, we're open-minded. We're flexible now. We're going to be far more forgiving and considerate to the second driver. Even though they're now starting to think, well, yeah, we've really got to focus on Max in the Drivers' Championship. So, you know, old habits die hard in a way. And now I'm guessing with the parity to Max that Christian Horner's now getting on the blower saying that these upgrades, well, they've been a success, that their tyre deg issue from Bahrain and Miami especially, oh, that's a thing of the past now. It means they can give Yuki the same type of car to try and boost efforts on 2 fronts, try and score as many points with more performance in a really narrow operating window, and also trying to get more and more data to then make sure the upgrades are more effective and can help both drivers. It's partly why I think Lawson was dropped and why Williams have progressed so well. Clear setups and proper testing matter. You're limited in scope in a way with a rookie if they haven't been given the proper testing beforehand, which Liam Lawson, he didn't really get that much in 2024. I don't recall seeing him in the RB18 during 2024, or any car really. But giving Yuki the same car as Max right now, it was a degree of trust around a circuit which he truly enjoys and knows well. And that trust, that was tested and then compromised when he did admittedly bin the car. And, you know, literally binning the floor, that was the upgrade. And also, one of the major downsides here, considering that the cost cap is really probably starting to bite people because they're probably dedicating funds towards 2026 as well, is that parts are going to be scarce. And if you're running the same spec of car, it means you're running the same type of floor, which means you can't fall back to the old parts, otherwise you compromise time for both Max and Yuki, and then you're back to where you started at the beginning of the season. With Yuki compromising one of the 2 floors, they have to try and repair it, which means it won't be as optimal as a completely fresh and unbroken floor, and it's going to then have to divert resources back at the factory to rush a brand new floor in time for maybe Spain, maybe even Canada. Because yes, we are going into a triple header and Yuki caused that much damage. And if you look to the trusty Destructors Championship chart, Yuki, he's just blown right past Jack Doohan. He told Jack to hold his beer. That crash in Imola alone caused an estimated $1.2 million of damage. Marco calling the damage a huge setback. You've got very little time, if any, in the factory to completely rebuild the car, so you've got to just do it on the fly. So this was not ideal at all. Still, could have been worse. Because fortunately, for all concerned, Yuki Tsunoda did convert a pit lane start into points. Exactly what Christian Horner was saying before the race that he was expecting from Tsunoda, to fight back through the midfield and get into the top 10 by the end of it, and maybe playing some sort of team role in compromising the McLarens. And also, even though he was running a repaired car, there was something in the tank that Yuki could extract from the RB21, but the team did lose a chance to judge the upgrade properly over a clean weekend on 2 cars. But to be fair, Verstappen's win did show the flaw provided some sort of effect. And let's not forget, Red Bull's got to make hay while the sun shines, folks, because Mercedes, they might regain some form in Monaco because it's cooler. They'll get over the shaky start they had in Imola. Ferrari's upgrades coming for Spain, so they might catch up. If all doesn't go too well and Yuki doesn't kick on from this point, then Red Bull might be compromised in trying to get second place in the Constructors, which I think would be the ideal target. Try and get one over Mercedes. I can also imagine that there is a condition to this degree of trust. It raises the bar. Because now he can no longer just say, oh, well, you can't judge me properly because I don't have the same car as Max. Well, apparently, according to himself and Red Bull, he does now. So therefore, he can be now more legitimately compared to Verstappen, and if there is a very big gap to them in qualifying, it's going to be all the more jarring. I have admitted that in previous qualifying sessions there has been a huge gap, several tenths even, but Yuki could hide behind the mask of just saying, well, he's got an older car. But what it does prove, though, is that in that older spec of car, a more, neutered car, he still could score points at moments when Max could barely score any. When he was in Bahrain, 6th or 7th, in the bottom half of the top 10, Yuki was troubling 8th place behind Ocon. He wasn't that far behind, so hopefully, if Yuki can get over that damn qualifying issue, then maybe he could be of use to Red Bull, and maybe in Q3 like we saw in Jeddah, with providing Max Verstappen the tow to then get pole position. Just being there will be enough for Max. And yes, I know, having only 7 Red Bull Racing points to his name is small potatoes, but as I keep saying, at least unlike Lawson and Perez toward the end of his tenure, there were some potatoes to be had. And also, let's not forget what's happening in F2. The same thing could easily apply to what's going on with Lawson. Arvid Lindblad is absolutely bossing it. He's now in the top 5 in the F2 Championship. He's already got the super license points required, so everyone's going to be paying attention to that kid. Pepe Marte's also going to be quite competitive because he's also vying for that seat, having a decent fight back after being completely bamboozled by Hajar. And even though Marco has said that there will be no driver changes this year, Arvid's case will certainly test that declaration of Marco's. So if Yuki wants to try and survive into 2026 and get to drive the RB22 where his input would actually be in that car, then he's got to step up now. He can't hide behind the excuse of saying he doesn't have the same car anymore. Simple as. I mean, sure, it's clear that his working relationship with Red Bull's pretty good at the moment because they are taking a chance on him with parts that are quite scarce at the moment, but yeah, this incident around Imola, around the track where he was expected to do quite well at, yeah, that wasn't great. And therein lies the rub. Qualifying. Yes, it has been a wider issue for many people up and down the grid. It's not an isolated incident for Yuki, and quite frankly, he has got to really improve his game there, like many other drivers who find themselves lower than they should be. Because when he did try and push it over a single lap, he blew the car to smithereens. And then what was really galling is that he was overconfident, that he tried, in his own words, to be a hero around his second home track, to make proud the team that was once known as Minardi. He and Gasly, the longest serving members of the team of Minardi heritage. The community that took hold of him after his really shaky start to F1. He wanted to make them happy at their final race together. And it's all got to do with that dang narrow operating window again. The sweet spot far smaller than the racing balls he left behind, Yuki called the RB21 sharper and not easy to keep in that window, especially when the tyres are new, but again, plenty of rivals are in the same boat here. The majority of drivers complaining that this year's Pirellis are unpredictable on the opening laps, and Pirelli itself can't explain why the soft C6s were so unusable around Imola. As far as the teams were concerned, all the C6s were good for were to be listed on F1 Authentics as a coffee table. Because there were many drivers who couldn't get anything out of the C6 over a whole lap. It would just conk out around Sector 3. The only team that could make something out of this tyre were McLaren, and even then it could barely do a lap. But having said that though, the McLaren innovation at the moment, this could benefit them really immensely around Monaco, because if they can at least make use of it for 10 laps at the beginning of the Grand Prix, then they could take an early stop, try and scamper off, get a good start, who knows? McLaren might do well here because of it, and therefore give them a little bit more confidence. But then again, with the upgrades that Red Bull had, they could easily figure in some shape or form. I don't think they're going to be at the bottom half of the top 10. And look, I get why Yuki's trying to do this. There is so much riding on his promotion. He wants to be the one that breaks the Red Bull second seat curse. He, again, wants to be the hero. All he ended up breaking was $1.2 million worth of Formula 1 car. Oops. Yuki confessed that he changed up the car too much in time for Q1 and attempted to try and nail that lap in just one single go-around, trying to save maybe a set of tyres for later, which would explain why he was so greedy going into the Villeneuve chicane. But he has since promised that he will pull back a little bit, at least until he figures out what he can do with the narrow operating window, when he can actually test the limits in confidence instead of trying to do it over a single lap. He thought that, ultimately, doing that, the crash was stupid and unnecessary. And then you see publication after publication running with that news, saying that the crash was stupid and unnecessary, and therefore calling Yuki stupid, and then starting to ruminate that he could get the sack and Isaac Hajar be promoted this year. They're thinking in Red Bull's mind, whereas I think Red Bull is genuinely trying to cool it with the driver transfers. I don't know who's right here. And look, I get it. Yuki being promoted to Red Bull, it was great when it happened, but it's old news now. The story around Isaac Hajar is far more compelling, more likely to get clicks, especially after he rebounded after Melbourne. The world completely took him under his wing, Anthony Hamilton gave him a massive big hug, it really resolved him, and then he went on to score consistent points, admittedly. Isaac's bringing home the bacon, and that really has to be noted. Credit where it is due here. I was wrong about Isaac, and I'm so glad he's proving others wrong as well. But at the same time, it's getting people a little bit too excited that now they want him promoted, whereas I think Red Bull probably don't want him to do that because, well, Isaac's doing so well for Racing Bulls, they've got some sort of contest in the Constructors as well, so why would you take away your best driver there? I mean, come on. Don't rush things. Don't rush Isaac like they rushed Liam, burning through so many youngsters, meaning that in a couple of years' time, they'd only have Arvid Lindblad. Then they'd have to hire outside of the pool. They'd be back to where they started. Red Bull's, I think, trying to stamp out that narrative, but the media keeps on pressing it. And all it's doing, I think, is pissing Max off. And from what we can gather from this year's F1 car, including the tyres, is that Yuki's bigger issue isn't with the RB21 per se, it's to do with how it handles the Pirelli rubber. He said that he pushes them too hard, meaning that they're overcooked by the time he comes to start a lap, and he's therefore compromised. So therefore, I think the best thing that Tsunoda can do right now is to try and understand how the tyre works. Tyre management. That could easily give him that little bit extra to get into Q3 and make his Sundays a little bit easier. And again, the C6 was such an enigma for all of the teams. No one was quite sure how it was going to work, because no one ran it in pre-season testing, even though it was perfectly available. In fact, the C5's barely got a look in. Yeah, I know that many people are going to be thinking, oh, you're only saying this because you're a Yuki Tsunoda fanboy, Law. You were championing for him to get this promotion. But quite frankly, the way I see it is that he deserved at least 1 year. After all the time he served with Racing Bulls and AlphaTauri and VCarb, and I know that many people will just say, well, oh, Honda facilitated his path into the Red Bull Junior team. He was only there for a couple of years. Well, may I remind you, Max Verstappen was parachuted into the Red Bull Junior team. He only serving with that team for 5 months and barely any real racing time, because within a few weeks of him starting Formula 3 with the Red Bull colours, he got his Toro Rosso test. We all knew what was going to happen, so he was only there as a token member. Whereas with Yuki, he did serve time in F3 and F2. So arguably, in terms of junior careers, Yuki was more of a Red Bull driver than Max was. And I really hope that Red Bull are genuinely trying to change and be more forgiving to the second seed, because I seriously think that the media just does not believe anything that Red Bull is saying. That could easily be their own doing with how inconsistent or indeed consistent they've been. Christian starts to downplay any issues and upsells the good stuff about a driver. Then he starts to be non-committal. Then he starts to be a bit more pragmatic, saying, look, the fact is though, we are where we are, and our so-and-so driver has to deliver. And then at the end of it, he goes, well, unfortunately, there was not really much we can do. Yeah, that's the way it's been going the last few years, and people are thinking that will happen to Yuki as well. But maybe they have turned a corner. Maybe they have listened to what Verstappen's been saying and don't change up the driver every few months. Because in just the months we've had since Christmas, Max has had 3 teammates now, if you count Yuki. And as I mentioned right near the start of this video, To keep Max happy, you change up the car. And yet Yuki's promotion, it's enough fuel for pundits to chew over, including the likes of Jacques Villeneuve, pointing to the past examples of drivers being cut loose from Red Bull, and understandably, it's low-hanging fruit. You know, it is quite easy to poke the Red Bull bear and just go, hey, you gonna do it? You gonna do it? You gonna sack him, Christian? Huh? You gonna do it? Yeah, come on. You gonna do it? Yeah, come on. You gonna do it? And yet you might be thinking, well, you're guilty of this law. And yes, I have been complicit in that to some extent. But we have admittedly just got to look at the situation, and Red Bull is really in a bind right now, and I've got to give them the benefit of the doubt that they really got to try and fix this problem, keep Yuki around for at least a couple more years until some of their juniors are ready to go, and then we'll see what happens from there. Just stick to the promise. Don't change up the lineup this year. But no, just the bear is being baited still. Because, look, Red Bull really needs to change here, because as more senior staff leave for pastures new, as we have seen the last couple of years, Red Bull needs to evolve and adapt and think of life post-Verstappen. If he chooses to leave early, if he chooses to retire at the end of 2028, as his contract stipulates, there has to be a thought, a consideration as to who will succeed him. Is it going to be Yuki Tsunoda for a couple of years, or a few years even, as then Lindblad and Hajar take hold at the various respecting teams, and then ultimately, it's a Hajar-Lindblad lineup if all goes well and the trajectories continue to point to where they are going right now? Then we might see a really consistent lineup for years to come. Arvid and Isaac, not too shabby. Two drivers who are quite popular with the youth. But still, Red Bull's leadership, they are really letting these old habits die hard. They're either knowingly or unknowingly judging Tsunoda by harsh metrics. Cost, consistency, qualifying. Every crash or rising academy star, it fuels old reputations and overshadows new promises. Because not many people are paying attention to Yuki's fight back from 20th to 10th and are focusing still on that crash. And few also believe Horner or Marco in whatever they say anymore, because they'll simply just point to Liam and just go, well, okay, well, why didn't you give him more time then, Well, as I have theorised in many videos, so I will get the frame of doubt out for this one, I think there were a lot of contractual shenanigans, Liam's team, bluffing or something like that, Marco calling his bluff and saying, well, look, you got your seat for 2025, you didn't cut the mustard, there you go, now you're at our mercy, Liam. And I don't like these kind of silly buggers tactics, but I think that's what it was, really. Liam's team played hardball, and Red Bull's balls were even harder. So the best thing that Yuki can do right now is to just up his qualifying game, because as we have seen in the fair few races, his Sundays are better than his Saturdays. So if he can make his Saturdays better, then he'll make his Sundays even better. He could even trouble the top 5 on occasion, really help out Max in a way. And it does help that Verstappen has been warmer and offered more praise to Tsunoda than he had done for more of his recent teammates. That combination does keep the door open for Tsunoda if he can tidy up his one-lap execution. And I return to my poll on both YouTube and Twitter, and the overall sentiment, at least from you fine folks, is a shrug of the shoulders, and then you move on. For Red Bull, that's quite a huge deal in my opinion, because it goes against the flow of people just dunking on the second seat because, well, it's de rigueur, it's fashionable to do so. For them going from loser territory to territory, progress. But I think it's a narrative that the mainstream F1 media has not caught up with yet, because I just keep seeing headlines about Tsunoda and doom-mongering and thinking he's about to be chopped. And then you get Red Bull just saying everything's hunky-dory, that they're really making use of Yuki Tsunoda's presence. He's a fan favourite. He's all over their social media feeds doing all of these cute little sounds on TikTok and what have you, because Formula One is gaining a lot of youngsters via TikTok. Tsunoda's all over it. And that really helps too, because Verstappen has pulled back from doing those sorts of engagements because he doesn't really see the fun side of it anymore. It distracts him from trying to win a 5th world title. But Yuki, he stepped up to the plate and he's being rather masterful. It's a real online battle for fan sentiment between the team, the fans, and the press. I'm really kind of fascinated by it, but I'm also thinking that Yuki's been drawn the short straw. Maybe your vote perhaps stems from you seeing a very likeable driver who was able to walk away from a scary crash which not that long ago could kill him, and yet still he could rebound enough to get a point, which Horner did ask for. So therefore, out of all that, things considered, his performance looked fine, reasonable. While headlines around the world keep returning to pressure, spares, and the possibility of another driver change. Sure, those are valid points to bring up because that crash would have cost a lot and resources are quite scarce at the moment given what we're going into next year. But it does paint a picture that people are just looking to the negative side of Yuki Tsunoda, that they're going to be branding him as error-prone, crash-worthy, expensive. And they are probably, the media, waiting for that one moment when Yuki maybe misses something or the mistake happens and then he lets out an expletive and they'll go, "There, you see, it's the same old Yuki. He's not changed one bit." And I think it will stand in even bigger contrast because we barely hear any from Max this year. Him taking a deliberate stance and very much limiting his curse words. Now that Max is not giving the media what they want, they'll turn to Yuki. And it really exacerbates it because I recall Max responding to a question that Lando was smack-talking Verstappen around the time of Miami. Max didn't get all disappointed or angry. He was just like, Lando can say what he wants, I don't care. And that's quite mature, Max. And it just makes Lando out to be the bully. And I don't think that's what Norris was trying to do. So therefore, sorry, Lando, I think that backfired because Max, he was just like, no. So the only way I think Yuki can win the media over is to start races higher up, score more, and help Red Bull challenge for P2. But yes, based on my own opinion and that of you, my audience, Tsunoda, he's doing okay in the grand scheme of things. Which for me is how we should be viewing one Gabriel Bortoleto. His time in F1 has been met with little fanfare, but his career so far is looking likely to emulate that of George Russell, and look how he's turned out. To find out why I imagine that Saba will do well having Gabi and Nico working together as they then become Audi, watch this video next, straight after this one.